Hello and welcome to the Exeter Impact Podcast, where we host engaging conversations with research experts, sharing their insights, approaches and solutions for advancing impact of research at the University of Exeter and beyond. Our episodes cover diverse flagship research across academic departments and impact types. Tune in every month to learn about planning and embedding research impact and opportunities to develop your impact portfolio. The podcast is developed and hosted by me, Gemma Sharp, an Impact Evidence and Evaluation Officer at the University. Episodes are made available for staff to listen or watch via the Impact Community of Practice SharePoint site and linked in the Exeter Weekly Bulletin. Welcome, Gemma.
Hi, nice to be here.
You're working on particularly topical research around mental health, menstruation and the menopause. Can you please describe the work in more detail for us?
As you say, so I'm interested in the intersection of menstrual and mental health. It's funny that you call it topical because it feels topical, but obviously it's been around forever. But there seems to be a bit of a wave at the moment of people interested in particularly the menopause, and from that I think an interest in menstruation is starting to take off as well. I'm an epidemiologist, so the methods that I use involve looking at big data sets and looking at the health of people across the life course, from menarche to menopause, and looking at their experiences of menstruation and reproductive health throughout that life course and how that links to their mental health. So are there effects of mental health on their menstrual experiences? And also vice versa, or most often vice versa. So are there effects of things like heavy menstrual bleeding, menstrual pain on mental health?
Can you describe how you got started on planning your impact?
Yeah, so I'm very driven by a desire to create some kind of change. And so that was where I got started with planning the impact, but also planning the research. So I noticed that there was very little research around menstrual and mental health. Actually, it was during the COVID-19 pandemic I noticed that there were lots of anecdotal reports online of people saying that their menstrual periods had been affected by COVID, and there was no research. And when I went to the data sets that I normally use, I realised that we had quite poor data on menstrual health as well. And so there was a clear need there, but it was really driven by the desire to be able to conduct research that leads to some sort of change, so that we have better understanding of menstrual health, so that people have better outcomes for their mental health related to their menstrual health. So in terms of impact planning, I think I started by reaching out to organisations that I knew were working in that area, because interestingly with this field, the scientific literature is really lagging behind the public interest, and there are lots of charities and things for advocacy support groups and things for people who menstruate, but there was very little in the scientific literature. So there were these groups out there, and they were crying out for people to do research. Initially just reaching out to them, finding out what the stakeholders really wanted us to be doing, so that we weren't just creating the research agenda ourselves. So initially I ran a stakeholder workshop with people ranging from local primary school head teacher to people from the Department for Education, but also more widely, so mental health charities like Mind. We had somebody from the UNFPA attend as well, lots of different kind of menstrual activists, and we just said to them, what are the what's the research need as far as you kind of understand it. And that was really good for kind of gathering those perspectives, which we used to feed into the research priorities that we then tried to undertake.
You mentioned there some of your stakeholders. How did you consider your stakeholders, or how did you, taking it a step back a bit, how did you think about who you wanted to talk to and how you might approach that?
I didn't really know initially. I was thinking definitely mental health charities. At the time, Mind had just done, they just put a web page up about premenstrual dysphoric disorder. So I knew that menstrual and mental health was on their agenda. So I reached out to them. And it sort of snowballed slightly. So I also was aware that there was an effect on educational attainment and education, spending time in schools. And so I knew that there was that education angle as well. Actually, I knew some local teachers, so I got to them that
Useful.
way. Yeah. Then I reached out to other research collaborators, academics as well, who already had their own networks of stakeholders within their fields, because it's a very interdisciplinary field. And it sort of snowballed. And I think some people were less engaged and less interested, and some people were very engaged and highly interested. And so from there, it's sort of filtered a little bit to having a group of stakeholders that are really engaged in what we're doing.
I know that you applied theory of change to planning your research using a framework. Can you explain how you used it?
I would like to say that I started by using theory of change, but I didn't know about it when I started planning my impact, so I didn't. But I found it really useful to apply. I think so theory of change makes it look like it's a very linear process of, you identify your stakeholder, you've got your big goal, and this is how you reach your big goal. And I found that very useful. That's how my mind works. And so it would have been nice to have this at the start. Actually, where I was is I had some stakeholders, I was doing some activities, but it wasn't very focused. Whereas I think theory of change really helped me to focus and see the kind of the pathway to impact and understand how I was going to get to the place that I wanted to get. It also forced me to be really clear about where I wanted to get. It was really useful. And then I was able to take some of the things that I was already doing and map them onto the theory of change, which made me feel like, yes, what I'm doing is the right thing to be doing. So it's been really useful for me.
And what do you consider have been the benefits for you professionally of using that theory of change approach?
I think that now, moving into new projects, I've got that in my arsenal and I can start from there. And it really helps with communicating to other people as well, I think. Okay, this is our shared vision and this is where we want to get. And this is where I think what I think we need to do to get there. And I think it's really useful for, nobody has infinite amounts of time, right? So I think it's really useful for making sure that the activities you're doing are going to be the most effective things that you could be doing. So I think for me it's really helped with that kind of narrowing. So I know, this is where I want to get. These are the things I need to do to get there, and I'm just going to focus on those, and I'm not going to get distracted by other kind of things that I maybe could be doing along the way. I think in terms of professionally, I just think it's very good for streamlining your activity, which you have to do. You have to prioritize what you're working on.
And what do you see as the change you hope to see from employing that kind of framework to your research?
So, my overall kind of vision for the world is that we have we work towards a world where menstrual experiences don't have a negative impact on mental health and social well-being of women as well. So women can stay in the workplace, they can have a good quality of life and good mental well-being as well. I think that that's quite a kind of big overarching vision. I think that the theory of change really helps me to see the more kind of incremental steps as well that we might want to take to get to that point.
Has this approached or influenced the impact goals that you set? Were they changed as a result of that kind of analysis using this framework?
I think the overarching goal remains the same, of this like lovely like happy world where everybody's menstrual experience doesn't impact their mental health. But I think the sub goals have changed slightly in that I have sub goals now. I have a clearer understanding of what things I would want to do to get there. I think particularly so I can apply this theory of change to like individual projects, but I think I find it really useful as well to think more broadly about my overall. So I run a research consortium called the Menarche, Menstruation, Menopause and Mental Health 4M Consortium, and we're not kind of within that. We're not. Lots of people are doing research. You know, we've got about 350 members globally, and they're all either stakeholders or researchers. They have their own research strategies and research projects. So we're not kind of, there's no like top down, we're not dictating what research people should do. But I think for me, sort of overseeing this as a kind of facilitator of that research, it's really helped me to think, okay, what do I want? Like, why am I running 4M? What's the vision? How do I think I can help us to get there through this kind of more supportive research activity? You know, who are my stakeholders in this case? Well, they're researchers, they're early career researchers, they're other researchers around the world. You know, what are my activities? Are the things like running networking events and things like that. And so that's really helped me as well with that. And I think that will feed into to my kind of research impact vision as well, eventually.
Sure, because you're also a director of research and impact at the university, so I would imagine putting this framework into place will help you to support others in that area.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think so. The next research day that we have in the department, I'd really like to just put out a worksheet for the theory of change and just get people to just start thinking about it if they haven't already, and just, you know, post-it notes, start mapping out what their theory of change would be, because personally I find it very useful, and I think there will be lots of other people in the department that will find it useful as well.
Do you have particular impacts that you hope to achieve and evidence, and how will you go about that?
Yeah, I think that evidence is the really tricky bit. I think it's all quite tricky, but I think the evidence is the really tricky bit. I mean, thinking about my personal research, I'm trying to, you know, any press interviews or anything like that, I'm trying to like keep a note of them, even just screenshots of things, people talking on LinkedIn about, we ran a conference last year, there were lots of people, there was a bit of a buzz about it on LinkedIn, just screenshots. I've got a whole folder of screenshots, and just trying to keep some kind of evidence so that I can come back to it later. It's been my strategy so far. Thinking about a specific research project, so we've just done a piece of work, it's out as a preprint, it's under review, looking at the impact of or the relationship between heavy and painful menstrual periods around the time of GCSE exams, and we've shown that girls that experience those symptoms spend less time in school during that GCSE year, and then they actually also do worse in the exams compared to their peers that haven't experienced those symptoms, their female peers. And for that, we're thinking, you know, our stakeholders are going to be people like the Department for Education and also school teachers. And we're trying at the moment to come up with a bit of a comms strategy around how we communicate that. And And yeah, so I mean, it's early days, but once it's out and it's out in the world, then I will definitely be taking screenshots and newspaper cuttings if we're lucky, and that sort of thing, and just trying to keep everything that we can to show that this has been useful. Any kind of emails with any of our stakeholders and that sort of thing. That's what I'm going to try anyway.
So thinking about challenges, what challenges do you anticipate in terms of achieving those and evidencing those impacts?
I think the building the partnerships takes so long. And if you have really engaged stakeholders who are really excited that you're doing this research, then that's easy. It's easier. If you have to convince people that this was useful and that it's worth their time, then it's a bit harder. I've found that the conference that we ran last year was really good because we got the stakeholders in and we showed them that we were doing this research, and there was a bit of a buzz. But keeping that going, 6 months later, is difficult. I run a regular meeting, but people start to drop off, and there's this feeling that I should run something else to keep the momentum going. I think that the challenge there is keeping stakeholders engaged over a period of time and having the time to do that is a big challenge. I think that things like the Impact Accelerator Awards could help with that in terms of maybe getting that extra support to keep those partnerships going, and to run kind of events and things to keep people engaged. So that's what I would hope to be able to do. But I think at the moment it's just the time the time to keep it going. I feel like it's worth it, but it's just that continual investment of time.
And I think those awards that you mentioned that are in-house, so Exeter University Awards, to support that kind of work are really useful and can help to fill that time void that you're experiencing. So for support on those projects to capture that evidence at an early stage. So in terms of evidence, how do you think you'll go about collecting it in a practical way?
I will screenshots, saving URLs, but also in case the URL goes dead, screenshots, newspaper cuttings, just keeping a log as well. I've tried to do that for 4M, just every time we have any kind of external facing any interest online where people are talking about 4M, I try to keep a log of it, and just hoping to build up that evidence base, and maybe some of it I won't end up using, but just I'd rather be inclusive and try to get as much as I can.
I think it can be useful for us to reflect on our original approach to preparing our potential research impact. What insights do you have for other researchers who are in your position, so starting their journey of planning their impact, perhaps using theory of change or another framework? What insights do you have for them, and how would you get started?
So I think you use the theory of change. It's really nice to have that from the start, definitely. And then I think my biggest piece of advice would be around building those partnerships with the stakeholders, because that takes a bit of time, but it can be really rewarding. I think it can just be really rewarding on a personal level as well. Like, it's just nice to have those connections and to speak to people outside of academia who are working more kind of on the ground. I find that really really rewarding. And so I think spending a little bit of time on that is a useful thing to do. And I guess speaking to people in those organisations, not being afraid to reach out to them. So I do a lot of like cold emailing, just like,
yes.
Hey, I've seen that you're doing this. This is really great. Like, this kind of aligns with some of the stuff that I'm trying to do. And a lot of people will say like, oh, it sounds like we have a shared vision. And it's like, yeah, we're coming at it from completely different angles. We're doing very different things, but like we want to get to the same place. So I think finding those people is really useful. And then you don't have to do everything yourself is the other thing I would say is sometimes if you're thinking about impact, it can sound like a whole new job on top of teaching and doing research and everything else that we do.
Yes.
But actually, once you find those stakeholders, then they can do some of that legwork as well, or even for you in terms of, this is what they do. They work with, they try to make change in this area, and they need the research to back that up. And you've provided the research, and then you can work with them rather than just feeling like you've got to suddenly like, be phoning up number 10 and trying to like implement policy changes on your own. So partnership working, definitely.
And is there a particular partner that stands out for you, an example where you've influenced their practice or their policy?
I don't think we have, I'm just trying to think, I don't think we're
not there
currently at that phase, but we have some partners that we work with quite closely, and they came to our conference and they're very they're just waiting for us to provide the evidence basically, and so like for example this stuff around the education, we've spoken to them about what are the next steps, and we're involving them when we're thinking about our communication strategy as well. In another project I'm running, we have a stakeholder advisory group, and again they're like very, very excited that we're doing this research and are just waiting for the results. And so we'll keep them engaged throughout the study. And then that means that once it's published, we've got this group who've been engaged with it from the start and are hopefully as invested as we are in getting it out there. Keeping that kind of diverse stakeholder group engaged as well is I think another piece of advice I'd offer to other people.
That that ties in really well to impact planning, making sure those stakeholders are on board from the very start and they're excited to have the knowledge exchange from your research, and they're just waiting on standby to implement work as a result of that learning. I think that's really, really exciting. So one final question that I ask all our guests is, what single piece of advice, based on your experience, would you advise other researchers to ensure their research impact is achieved?
It sounds like I've got shares in theory of change and I don't, but I'd say use that. Like, I just found it really, really useful for just clarifying my thoughts, getting it all down. My brain works very logically, and I imagine that lots of people watching or listening to this will be in the same boat. And it's just really nice to be able to apply all of these messy thoughts to a framework. I've found that has really been transformative, really, in clarifying where I want to go, how I get there.
Fantastic note to end on. Gemma, thank you for participating in the podcast today. We really appreciate your time. You can access the details of departmental impact and evidence planning workshops via the episode links for support to plan impact in readiness for a REF impact case study.